back in his head. What a beautiful kick by Kazim Ayek. Look at this straight to Mora. My God! My God, what a slam by Mora!
This is the FightBox Podcast with Don Roid.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the FightBox Podcast. My name is Don Roid, and thank you for downloading today's episode, which is brought to you on Wednesdays, absolutely free, thanks to the FightBox HD TV channel, and is available to download and listen to on www.fightbox.com, on iTunes, and on Stitcher. This is a podcast that is a reflection of what FightBox HD is all about, and that is the world's best compilation of combat sports disciplines, all on one channel, featuring interviews with fighters from all around the world in a range of different fighting sports. Everything from MMA, kickboxing, and Muay Thai to pro wrestling, sumo, and everything in between. From Hall of Famers to amateurs, every fighter has one thing in common, and that is a unique, interesting, and heartfelt story from their own personal experiences in the world of combat sports. All right, everybody, this is it. We did it. This is episode 52. It's the last episode of the year. It is the 52nd consecutive episode from when we started this adventure all the way back in the first week of January in 2015. We made it one full year. That's a lot more than a lot of podcasts can say. You know, even Goldberg didn't make it a year. So that was one of my major goals when I started this thing, is that I wanted to have a guest every single week, and I wanted to have an episode every single week, because, you know, that's one of the things about podcasting when I started this thing, is that, you know, I heard that, you know, one thing you got to do is you've got to be consistent. You've got to be there each and every week. So proud of myself, and also want to thank you guys for supporting us. I know that a lot of you guys are here each and every week, and girls too as well. Very small demographic for the girls, but ladies, if you are out there listening, thank you very much. And thanks for the support. So it has been a full year. Every single week in 2015, we have had another episode of the FightBox podcast, and I've got to talk to so many people from so many different disciplines and so many different fighters from around the world, and it's been quite a wild ride. I'm going to save a lot of this patting myself on the back and self-appreciating for next week's episode, which will be the 1 year anniversary of the FightBox podcast. And as it stands right now, all is quiet at FightBox HD. We're still celebrating the holiday season. Preparations are already in gear and are already moving forward for a lot of cool things coming up in 2016. A lot of good live events, and some new programs are going to be debuting on FightBox HD. So we'll keep you updated on that. You can always check us out at www.fightbox.com for all the latest goings on, and better yet, for news, check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/fightbox. We're also on Instagram and on YouTube, so you can check us out in there in the meantime and in between time. I, on a personal note, had a great holiday season. Got to spend some time with my wife and kids. I just saw the new Star Wars film, and liked that very much, and looking forward to the new year and what that brings. But usually, you know, at the end of the year right now is this weird gray area. It's like this weird wormhole between the Christmas time and the New Year's time. It's this weird area where everybody's just kind of getting loaded and drinking and reflecting and feeling nostalgic and and all these weird things going on, and nobody quite knows what to do during this time. Do you go back to work? Do you just take the holiday season off? You know, what do you do? But one thing is that you always, if you're a fight fan, you always try to pick what was the fight of the year. And I'm going to give you my fight of the year for 2015 at the end of the show. So make sure you tune in for that after my interview with my guests today, Kane Roberts and Mike Wesemann. Yeah, that's right. I've got a rock god on the show here today. Kane Roberts, former guitar player for Alice Cooper, if you can believe that. When I started this podcast, never thought that I'd be interviewing a rock star who was on world tours and things like this, and living the dream that a lot of us lived of being on stage in front of a stadium full of people, and partying with hot chicks every night, and being in a different town, and living that kind of a lifestyle. But we do have Kane Roberts on the show. Like I said, he did play with Alice Cooper on a few albums of his in the mid-'80s. Also had a pretty cool solo career and released several albums on his own. Has collaborated with and written songs for some top acts in the world, including Kiss. And is a huge sumo fan. Go figure that one out. So we're going to talk sumo with Kane Roberts and also Mike Wesemann joining us as usual. It's I believe the third time I've had Mike on the show. He runs sumotalk.com, which is a fantastic website if you're a sumo fan. Has some controversial comments usually when he talks about match fixing and people throwing bouts and conspiracy theories and all of that. So if you are a sumo fan, I'm sure that you are familiar with sumotalk.com and Mike Wesemann. He's one of the most knowledgeable guys around as far as sumo is concerned. In this interview, we talk a little bit of rock and roll and Kane Roberts' experiences in the world of rock and roll, and we also recap the world of sumo in 2015. It's kind of a 2015 year in review of sumo wrestling, where we talk about the biggest events and all the biggest headlines from 2015, and we also look ahead to the coming year and what we can expect in professional sumo coming up in 2016. So it's a pretty healthy interview, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time here at the beginning. So let's just go ahead and jump into that interview with Kane Roberts and Mike Wesemann right now. Kane, before we start getting into all the sumo stuff, which we will shortly, just give us a little bit of an idea of how you got into rock and roll and the crazy sex, drugs, and rock and roll scene in the 80s, before there was AIDS, before there was all this bad stuff, and it was just good, clean fun. How did you? Were you always a guitar player? Was this something that you did as a kid, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny the way that people I think get into music, and in my particular instance, rock, is similar to an athlete in that I'm not pretending that I was in danger of getting my head cracked open by limbs and fists or anything like that. But the thing is that some shoe drops, some bell rings. You see somebody that you become. Sort of enamored with. I would see different rock stars and guitar players, Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, any of those guys. Anybody named Jimmy, actually. No, I'm kidding. No, but what it's the same as an athlete seeing some boxer or MMA star or wrestler or whatever. And I think what happens then, if it really hits you, then you have no other choice. So, I would hear all the time, like, a lot of naysayers, you realize how many people are trying to play guitar, how many people want to make it, they want to record and everything. Your chance is very slim. Well, that really it would never matter to me. I knew no matter what I was going to keep doing this. And in my mind, I knew something was going to eventually happen. And then as one of my dreams, for example, was to play at Wembley Arena. I just thought, that would be such an amazing thing because, the greatest musicians in the world have played that place, and it's kind of a massive, venue. And then, when I finally got there, it's similar, I think, to a fighter or an athlete that sort of leaves those sort of local halls where there's 100 people yelling for them, and they finally get to like the championship, so to speak. And they're different people at that point because they've seen so much stuff. But, that passion just stays with you. So, in my instance, I ended up with a guitar in my hand when I was a little kid, and it just never faded. So I started recording and, doing as many demos as I could. And, I moved out to California, and I met, some really heavy people, some producers and musicians and stuff like that. And there's a guy named Bob Ezrin who produced Pink Floyd and some Kiss albums and everything. And he noticed me. He hooked me up with Alice, and we just became best friends. And I think that started the ball rolling in terms of like a real taste of, rock and roll reality. Yeah. And there were, it's true. I mean, touring in music is really kind of the greatest life. I mean, I would say mostly for guys, but I mean, a lot of women love it too, where, you're on the road. For me as a guy, I don't want to have to think too much. So I'm always told where I'm supposed to go. The limo would pick me up, and I was lucky because our hotels were like really kick ass, you know what I mean? And then, we'd go eat, we would do a sound check. And then the end of every night is this climax of 10, 20,000 people cheering. And it's a huge rush. So, I place myself kind of in the sort of lucky category. I mean, I did work really hard, and, that's a big part of it. But, I know a lot of talented people that didn't quite get there. But, it's always been in my blood, and there's just no way to step around it. So I kind of knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like you had quite an ambition, like right from the beginning. Like it wasn't just like, okay, I'm going to get a guitar and fool around. It was like, no, I know what I want to do, and I want to make it to the top, right?
Yeah. No, I think what happens, too, is I'm aligning this with athletes because I really do think it's similar. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of politics in sports. You think like in tennis, you win a match, you go to the next match. Well, to get into that tournament, you can have the number one player that just knows who you are. They know that your backhand, goes to the wrong place for them. And they won't let you in the tournament because they ask them, do you want which of these, unseeded do you want in there? So, I mean, that stuff happens in sports, and it also happens in music. So you have to really want it, and you have to just say that, every day is kind of a lesson in reality. I mean, people think, you make a demo, you do a showcase for a record company executive, and they sign you. Well, it doesn't happen like that. There's a lot of stuff going on. I had to sleep with a lot of people. No, I'm kidding. No, but there's a lot of extra stuff that goes on to get it done. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't as if I was completely organized or I knew what it was going to entail. I just knew that, there was nothing that would stop me win, lose, or draw. So,
Mike, were you aware of Kane and of him playing in Alice Cooper and his solo career and stuff before he contacted you at Sumo Talk, or?
No, I wasn't aware of Kane when he was in Alice Cooper. Alice took a bit of a hiatus, and by the time that he really came back in the late 80s, he never came through Salt Lake City. He didn't ever get a lot of radio play here. So the first time that I remember Kane was when I was in college in the early 90s, and they played his video on MTV. What was that song, the Cher song?
Oh, does anybody really fall in love? That one.
Yeah. Bon Jovi wrote that one, I think.
Yeah.
So I remember seeing that video, but I don't ever remember Kane going through Salt Lake. And so the first time he contacted me, it wasn't until after Sumo Talk had been established, and he was like, "Hey man, what do you think about that Asa Shouryu guy? Now that's a rock star." And if anyone would know, it'd be Kane.
So, Kane, when you finally hooked up with Alice Cooper, I think he'd already been through his troubled times, right? And he was clean and sober then. So what kind of a guy was Alice like when you finally hooked up with him?
Well, yeah, I mean, I really didn't know what to expect. I went down to New York and, because they said, Alice Cooper's interested in writing with you. And And so I, I went down there, and the first thing I had to do was go and meet with Bob Ezrin. I had to go into that room first. It's like the Wizard of Oz. I had to walk in. He's behind this big desk, and he's asking me all these questions, and he's basically saying you suck without Alice Cooper, that sort of. So I was like, oh, okay, So then I went in, and I walk into a room. There's a guy there named Shep Gordon. Mike Myers just did a documentary on him called Supermensch. The guy's just done so much to sort of change culture and music, and then Alice Cooper, and then some other players there. The sort of like backlog of guys that are different tiers of importance to Alice's career and everything. And I just got this real sense, I'm there with people that really shook up the world and changed music and the way people think and morality and all this stuff. So I threw up. No. So I just went in there and I said, hey, and I met Alice, and immediately Alice and I became best friends. I mean, he's the funniest guy that anybody will ever meet. I don't know if anybody remembers Andy of Mayberry, but I mean, he used to do this guy Floyd the Barber. He used to do this unbelievable imitation of him. It was just cracking me up. So I think that's one of the reasons. He had just come out of rehab, and he was I had no idea what level he had gone down to. He has a new movie out, a documentary actually called Super Duper Alice Cooper, and you see he had almost passed away. I mean, they found him in a hotel in Paris with this crack pipe that would look like this crystal palace. It went all the way up to the ceiling. I mean, his toenails had grown around his toes. I mean, he was just about dead. God. And I don't know how he survived. You know what I mean? But he believes that God saved him and all that stuff. And so what my influence with Alice Cooper was, I don't think when you come back, I don't think the audience should feel that you survived rehab. I think you have to come back as this nuclear version, like you were reassembled by some, aliens or something into this like very hardcore, heavy guy that can compete with the other, Ozzy and the other guys that are on Metallica or whatever. So that was kind of the sort of productive angle of our relationship. And the 2 years and albums that we did together were just, it was just, we were laughing the whole time and having a great time. But I really felt like I stepped inside some kind of jet stream. And, I never looked back. I've always had like a bit of, it's not an ego, but I'm kind of hyper in terms of my confidence and just to sort of go with the flow and everything. So yeah.
So how is it like to actually work with him and to write music with him? Was it kind of like, was he very hands-on, and was he, saying, here's my direction, here's what I want to go? Or, how did it work? Did you toss ideas out? Or?
Yeah, the thing is that with, it's the same thing when I was writing with, I wrote some songs with Paul Stanley and other people like that. And, when you go into it, you can't be nervous. You can't. I mean, I'm a fanboy just like anybody else, but, you got to sort of like go in there and just have whatever you have. You show them whatever you got holstered at that moment that you think is, sounds right. You can't do this research. I like this song to sound like, this song by Kiss or by Alice or whatever. You just got to go in there and show them who you are. So Alice is just a very open person in that regard. Alice's truest, I think, ability is to conceptualize. There's a song that we did on the Raise Your Fist and Yell album. And there was a tour. I mean, that tour was so dark it got banned in a lot of places. In Germany, like said, if he cuts the head off the baby, the tour is going to get shut down. All this crazy stuff. But on this particular song, there's a song called Prince of Darkness that ended up on John Carpenter's movie of the same name. And he just hit these lyrics. Took him maybe 15, 20 minutes, and you just would never change a word of it. And he's that sort of a guy where he's a true artist in that sense where, if you sit him down and say, we need some hit songs out of you by Monday, well, he might not be able to do that. But if you hang around with him and you create the sort of right environment and freedom and focus and goals and stuff, there's no one better at what he does. And, right now he's still touring. I'm going to go see him in Anaheim on, in a couple of days. And he's singing, I got to say he's singing as well or better than he ever has. So working with him is real easy because, everybody has a different style. But but there's just so much. There's so much in his database. You just sort of have to like sort of try to kick it a little bit and then get out of the way.
Yeah, like being a professional wrestler myself, I always thought that both you and Alice were almost parallels, like in your own profession, because like, I saw some interview with Alice at some point and he was like, yeah, I'm just like a normal dude. I like to drink coffee and play golf, and like, on the weekends I put on the makeup, and I go out there and I'm Alice Cooper. And when I see like the pictures of you, like with all the muscles and the machine gun guitars, and I'm like, this is like the musical version of pro wrestling,
Yeah, well, I always have had, when I was a kid, I used to, read a lot of comic books, and I would draw all the superheroes and everything. So, and I sometimes try to figure out why I got, I lifted so much. There's a couple of reasons, and somebody might have kicked sand in my face at some point. I don't remember, but I think the main thing when it came to music was somebody asked me why did I do that, and I said, well, if the camera passes over me once, I want people to remember that. And that really is, there's a lot of people that maybe not have gotten too immersed in my music or what I do with Alice, or even, who I am as a person, but they do remember me. So it was sort of a good move in terms of the notoriety. Well, a really funny thing, it's funny to me, you guys might go like, this is really boring, but he, there was a point there where, I had this gun guitar, and I had kind of a physique, and I had like a ripped shirt. And, during my solo feature, I would hold the guitar up in the air and pull a trigger, and it would shoot flame, like, maybe, 10 feet or whatever. And I remember reading in Cream magazine, I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was like the 80s rock magazine. And they said, the Rambo of rock. And I remember sitting there going, where are they getting that? And it's so stupid, because then I saw a picture of Rambo, the only thing I was missing was a headband, and he was like shooting a flamethrower. I was going like, how did I miss that? So.
Okay, so you're going through your life as a rock star, and the sumo stuff comes in how and when?
Well, I went to Japan. My company at the time did a short film, and that was a half an hour short film that they accepted at a really cool. It was a digital film festival in Japan. They flew us out there, and I was in my hotel room. We were at the Four Seasons, I think, in Shibuya, in Tokyo, and I remember I was watching TV, and the commercials all end with these little like these little sounds and everything. And it's like get cremated here. It's like everything has a little sort of a thing next to it. But I remember that Sumo came on, and it did nothing for me. I just watched it, and I was going, that's odd. You know what I mean? And I was watching someone, and I had no idea who anybody was. And then a few years later, I have the Japanese channel on here, and it's NHK, and I'm watching TV, and the Sumo comes on, and I see this guy Asa Shoryu come out. I didn't know what his name was, and I said, right away, there was just so much charisma and so much energy coming from this guy, and it was completely atypical to the rest of the sort of sacred ritualistic aspects of sumo, where everything just seems so proper and everything. This guy comes walking out, and I'm just going, how is that? How does somebody convey that much, to somebody like me, who I couldn't understand the language. I didn't understand anything about the sport. I didn't know why they faced off and then got up and got the salt. I didn't know what was going on at all. But this guy just sort of, registered with me, and he the way he won, and the look on his face, and the way he sort of challenged everything, every camera, every person in that venue. I just said, this is, I got to keep watching this guy. So I ended up becoming completely emotionally involved, with everything that Asa Shoryu did. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier. I mean, I would get so juiced up before his matches. I mean, I was kicking over cups of coffee right before he'd start fighting. I'd have to hit pause and clean everything up. I was just really, really crazy. What at one point I did reach out to Sumo Talk. I wrote a note to Mike Wesemann. and I started reading his blog, his site, and the sport itself. I mean, Mike has a very sort of surreptitious way of, like, schooling everybody. He works everybody. All these people are getting all upset or they're happy or whatever. You can tell he's sort of manipulating them and molding them into somebody into being a little bit more. Looking a little more closely at the action and sort of analyzing it rather than accepting everything that they're sold. And, a little dialogue started going back and forth, and I just thought that was super cool. And so, at the same time that I became sort of, in love with sumo, I also, became in love with Mike. No, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. No, I sort of fell in love with the website and these guys that were reviewing these matches, and everybody had their own take. But, as soon as you started reading Mike's, you knew that you were sort of upgrading your sort of insights into the sport and everything. But it was all Asa Shoryu's fault. And I was really upset when he left. And, to me, it hasn't been the same since. Even though we've seen, probably the most stunning yokozuna, ever, but with Hako, but yeah, it was all his fault.
Mike, where were you at when Kane first made contact with you, and what was going through your mind?
Well, this was probably back. It was back in Asa Shoryu's heyday, so 10 years ago, I think Kane and I had been going back and forth. And, when Kane said, hey, yeah, go Google me and you'll get a good laugh. And I see all those pictures, and, I grew up in the 80s and followed the heavy metal bands, and I saw every show that came into town. And so it was great to just have someone, that had been successful like that, someone that had lived a lot of our dreams. I can't play anything, but who doesn't have a dream of ever standing on that stage? So it was just fun to have someone who was accomplished like that, and to actually take interest in sumo talk. And he's got pretty good takes and a lot of perspective. So we have a lot of fun. Kane, Clancy, some of the other guys. A lot of the fun is happens where you don't see it off of the site, kind of emailing back and forth or texting or whatever. That's where some of the real fun comes. And right now, the quality of sumo is quite subpar. It's just, it doesn't keep my interest very much. But I think the reason I keep going is, because of the camaraderie with what I call the fellas, the guys that we hang out with on Sumo Talk.
So 2015 is in the books as far as sumo is concerned. And Mike, in your opinion, what are the biggest stories coming out of this year?
I think the biggest story, I think there's two stories. The first one is the string of sellouts that they were able to manage. The last time that the venue didn't sell out, I think it was day 2 of the 2014 Kyushu Basho. No, I'm sorry, day 12. And so they sold out every day after that, all through the entire 2015 calendar year until day 2 of the 2015 Kyushu Basho. But they had the arena sold out again just a few days later, and they kept that streak going. So I think one of the biggest stories has to be the way that sumo's popularity has rebounded, even though the quality isn't there at all. And so the way that they've been able to keep fans coming to the venue has been a huge story to me. And then I think the second biggest story has been Teruno Fuji. It's not that he came out of nowhere, but we didn't expect to see another guy. I think he's going to be on caliber with Hakuho. He may not get the 35U show, but he's really that type of a wrestler. And I think that's the second surprise of the year.
Yeah, definitely. I think that Teruno Fuji really did kind of come out of nowhere. I mean, he's only had 8 Mukushi tournaments, to get there to Ozeki, and so it is kind of out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, he didn't come in with a bang. In fact, his debut Basho, he started out 2-7, and so no one was really paying attention to him. And you had Ichinojo, who had just reeled off that big Basho. He had a good debut in the second Basho, did really well and had gotten a lot of hype. And so nobody was paying attention to Teruno Fuji. And then I think, Don, the first time we did an interview, you asked me who I liked, and I was like, I like this Terunofuji guy. And he'd scored like an 8-7 and 9-6, but you could just see that he had his own style of sumo. He could dig in, and he was a great defender. He didn't never mind if someone got 2 insides on him. He could always hold his own at the edge. And once he got up to the upper ranks and started clashing with the guys in the Sanyaku and the Ozeki and even the Yokozuna, you could see that he was for real. And so he didn't make a big splash like some of these guys, and like the way the media tries to make some of these guys, come in with a bang like Endo. He did it through grit and really good sumo.
Kane, what do you think about Terunofuji?
Well, Mike just hit on a very, to me, it was just what was going through my head while he was talking. If you look at the way Terunofuji, worked his way through the ranks, he started, kind of weak, but he kept fighting his way through. And then you look at the way the press handled Endo's arrival to the Makuuchi, and then you just say to yourself, this is sort of the way the entire Bashos are being engineered, but think of it also just how unstoppable he would have to be to do this sort of hard-earned raw reality climb through the ranks to get to Ozeki so fast. I mean, you see him. One of the things that Mike has taught me is the whole thing about footwork and how that applies to the physics of each match, and you can see how he plants himself, and somebody tries to lift him or throw him or whatever, and he just becomes dead weight, and it's not anything other than skill. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows he's pulling on the mawashi, just a perfect way to get rid of the leverage and all that stuff. It's just an amazing thing to watch, and his ability reflects to me directly off of guys like Endo. And in a more legit way, I think of also the contrast between him and somebody like a Haruma Fuji and Kakuryu, and then Ichinojo. Each one of these people, they're all Mongolians, but you look at the dynamic of how they've navigated through the ranks and how they've been treated in terms of the press and sort of the association and everything, and it's just an entirely different feel. And you have a sense of just being you just look at those guys, and it's tough to pay attention to the rest of the field. You know what I mean? Shohozan or any of these guys. Certain guys will their personalities and their skills. Now, Mike's not crazy about Amanishiki, but I always think he's one of those. I place his desire and passion and toughness up against Baruto, and who I thought was just incredibly talented guy. But Amanishiki's had his knees wrapped like a mummy for how many years? I mean, the guy's just stayed in there for whatever reason, and he's a real warrior. Not the most up and up of all skill sets of anybody, but yeah, I mean, I think Terunofuji in my mind is probably the strongest guy other than Hakuho. And I got there, partially because, reading Mike's reviews of it and then seeing it sort of manifest itself, on the screen.
What did you guys think? I think it was the Aki Basho when Hakuho pulled out and it looked like Terunofuji was just going to smoke everybody. And then he down with an injury towards the end. What was going through your mind when he went down with that injury?
Well, Mike? I'll take this one first.
Yeah.
I was a little bit disappointed because he obviously let up in that bout. He was fighting against Kisen Osato, and it's kind of funny because, I've been watching sumo for over 2 decades now, and I've always had the Japanese broadcast, and I was fortunate enough to be able to understand Japanese when I was first there, and I've always had that perspective of the sport. And so 2 decades ago, they would talk about practice in the ring, or they talk about these exhibition tournaments and how they never wanted the guys to let up because people would get injured. And so they've been talking about this all the time. Don't let up in Keiko, don't let up in the ring, or somebody's going to get injured. And that's exactly what happened, because you've got these guys who are weighing 400 pounds and they're moving laterally in a ring and they're applying pressure together, if you let up and then you go to plant your leg in a way that isn't natural, things like injuries are going to happen. And so when he went down, I was mostly disappointed because he let up, and I didn't think it was necessary. It certainly wasn't by any offensive skill or any pressure that Kiseno Sato was applying to him.
Yeah, that's, it's the same thing in pro wrestling too. It's like, I tell somebody, look, if you're going to hit me, frickin' hit me, because I need to know like what to expect from the other guy when we're in the ring together. And like, if I go to give you a suplex or something and you don't jump, then it's not going to work. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or if I get you halfway up in the air and you decide to start squirming around, then I'm going to drop you on your head. So it's like, there needs to be an equal amount of force, from both guys sometimes.
Exactly. They practice that way in the ring, and so when you get into the real tournament and it's not there, that's when people really do get injured.
Yeah, and you touched on it too, that the biggest story you said was that it's kind of a complete turnaround as far as the attendance is concerned at a lot of the Basho. What do you attribute that to?
Well, a lot of it is, and I hate to say it, it's due to, not that the bouts are rigged, but they call it Yaocho. A lot of it is due to the fact that the media in Japan is able to hype the Japanese wrestlers, and due to letting up in the ring, they're able to make it appear as if the Japanese wrestlers are kind of on par with the other guys. And so they score enough upsets over the Mongolians that the Japanese fans still keep interest. And then, of course, you had the Endo phenomenon. And as Kane knows, he's been part of, involved. He knows a lot about the culture, and, you get someone that's good looking or someone that, for whatever reason, whatever fluke reason, you can hype them. You start to hype them, and they did that with Endo, and that was a big reason why a lot of female fans started to come back and watch sumo. And even now, I'll be talking to Japanese people, and they'll still be shocked that, when Endo just gets his butt kicked. And of course, it doesn't surprise me, and it shouldn't really surprise anyone. But the way they've been able to fill the seats is to market, everything but the skill of the Japanese wrestlers. And then they throw in just enough Yaocho to make it appear like it's close. And so people have hope. They kind of get burned in the end, and the Mongolians win yet again. But at least they have hope through those first 12 or 13 days of the tournament.
So you think it's the hope that allows them to fill the seats, because maybe they don't remember that it was January of 2006. So it's going to be the 10-year anniversary coming up here of the last time a Japanese Yusho was. So
yeah, the media and the people within the Sumo Association know that very well, but they're certainly not talking about it. It's not something that they come in prior to a tournament and tout as one of the major storylines. And so all of that kind of gets swept under the rug, especially as long as these Japanese Ozeki can continue to upset the Mongolians late in the tournament. And so it looks as if they're close, and they're just falling short, and that's what keeps the people coming out and interested.
Interesting. Yeah, Kane, Mike kind of touched on it. He said you kind of understand about the culture. What do you think it is about the hype that's been filling the seats in sumo?
Most of my knowledge comes from my wife. She's Japanese, and I'll ask her questions about different aspects of sumo, and she doesn't want to accept or even think of the fact that there is yaocho. She wants every match to and if something looks a little fishy, she's like, well, what's that all about? So, the whole thing with the whole thing about filling the seats and everything, it's kind of, it brings up two questions for me. One of them is, I understand how, the whole Endo thing. I mean, he kind of came on there. I think a lot of people were, cutting him some slack on the dohyo and everything, but he's a good looking kid. And they right away, when they saw that they had a star, they pumped it up. I think Mike even mentioned a while ago that Ichinojo had this kind of like big sort of, goofy Totoro. Like, I don't know if you know what that character is, but he kind of looked like this big goofy guy that, had a lot of strength and everything. So he became like kind of like everybody kind of, thought him as a big lovable rikishi, you know what I mean? So they're smart in the sense that they know how to, they now have learned how to promote this. I mean, a little while ago, I remember seeing they tried to get all the young kids into it, so they started coming up with these really bizarre little mascots that they kind of dumped them a year or so later. I mean, they weren't doing anything in terms of the attendance or anything, and then they started focusing on these different Japanese rikishi and to give them the appearance that they can win. I mean, if you look at the records, Hisena Sato is like always kind of threatening. He might get 11 or 10, but he's always falling short. And that in there becomes my question. In other words, if they wanted to, let's say, get it done, why, if there is Yaocho, why don't they push it to the Yusho? In other words, how do you get it past Hakho and Haruma Fuji and Teru no Fuji? How do you get an actual win past that, guys? And I think, in my sense, is that it's just sacred territory. You're just sort of not allowed to push things completely into the end zone like that. I don't know. What's your feeling on that, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. I've maintained for a while now that I think that these Japanese ozeki can legitimately win maybe 2 or 3 a tournament. And I know a lot of people scoff at that, but I really think that's where the number is at. And Kane's right. If these guys could come in and win legitimately 11 or 12, they're going to give him the last 1 or 2 to propel them to the Yusho. But in the end, I totally agree with Kane. They're really stubborn about the history and the tradition of the sport. And it really would, kind of pervert things to propel a guy to the U-show by giving him 10 to 11 wins that he really didn't deserve. And there's yep.
No,
go
sorry, I
ahead.
didn't mean to cut you off, but it's also it's just interesting to watch how the press reacts to everything. In other words, a lot of the headlines are sort of negative in terms of all the Mongolians, and they're sort of pumping up all the Japanese, and so you start thinking, well, someone's going to just cross the line, and I think what one of the things that you made me think of, Mike, is one of the beauties of sumo is the ritual surrounded. It has such a deep cultural history and resonance that to do what Mike just said, to push somebody that is not really deserving of it at all into that sort of vaunted position of champion, just sort of, I think the sense of it would also be the Japanese population would sense it as well. And I don't think that would bode well for them. Do you agree with that, Mike? Or?
Yeah, I do. And, a lot of times when you get these Japanese ozeki kind of at the end of the tournament and they're fighting the Mongolians and the bout isn't rigged, or the Mongolian wrestlers aren't letting up. The Japanese guys, they get their asses kicked, and that's putting it lightly. And the reaction of a lot of Japanese people when they see that is, wow, an ozeki should never lose in that way. And they're right. They shouldn't. They should never lose without giving up a fight. And so I think there's still enough pride in the sport that the Japanese people are quite gullible. They're very orderly. They like to follow the crowd. But even the staunchest of Japanese fans, I think that they would realize it, especially going down the stretch, if a guy like Goid or someone just stormed through the 4 Mongolians and took the Yusha. They wouldn't buy it. And then I think people really start to question the integrity of sumo at that point.
Right.
What do you think about Yoshikazu? Because this dude seems to have come out of nowhere. In fact, Mike, I think last time we were talking with Clancy kind of made a joke about Yoshikazu and how he sucks or something like this. And then just after that, he really started to get on fire for the past couple Basho, and this dude is something's really biting his ass recently. What do you think is going on with him?
Well, he's fighting hard, and you don't see a lot of the Japanese ozeki fighting hard. And they're getting old and they're kind of broken down. They really can't fight hard anymore. And so you have a guy like Yoshikazu who comes out, fights hard. He's a little bit unorthodox, kind of like in American football when you have that running back who's short and squatty and it's hard to tackle him because he gets lower. And so when you get a guy with that much energy, with an unorthodox style, and, who's really got a strong will to win, he can have some success up in those higher ranks. Now, I do think that some of the elite Mongolians have given him wins in the last couple tournaments, and so that's kind of padded things. But there's no mistake that Yoshikazu is probably fighting with the most spirit of anybody out there right now on the Japanese side.
And just to kind of get back to what you guys were talking about, if I could just play devil's advocate here for a minute, like what would prompt a Mongolian to throw a match? I mean, what reason would they have to do it? Because like you said, like sometimes they just steamroll right through and they'll just whip somebody's ass. And other times, even the untrained eye can pick out like, okay, there's something going on here.
Well, that's they know where their money's coming from. I mean, the greatest thing in the world is the sold out venue. In rock or any sort of music or any sort of entertainment, they know they got to fill the seats. So if it was a constant beat up festival on these guys, and Mike is so right. I mean, one of the things that Mike points out a lot is when Kisene Sato gets his ass kicked by one of these guys, he's almost in a fetal position, rolling off the dohyo. It's just, and he always grabs that one shot. It's really awful. And if that was happening, every basho, I just don't, like some of the elderly Japanese that I talk to, I said, you watch sumo, and they'll just say, no, there isn't a Japanese yokozuna, period. Right. And so these guys, they have to give it up once in a while. Just like what Mike was saying. I think Kisene Sato's last record on the last basho was 10-5. So and what does that mean? Well, that means that he was competitive. He was up there with them, and he can knock these guys down. He beat Hako like legitimately once or twice, so he could possibly come back and finally do this. For me, the guy that I've never been sold on, even when some of the Sumo Talk guys thought, he had talent, and I also showed you was kind of giving him a helping hand, was Goedo. He's one of those guys that when he wins, I think he's looking around the dohyo and he doesn't even know how he won. He just seems like one of those guys to me. So I used to do this thing. I used to call him the Lost Boy. And I'd show a picture of him like in a forest going, I knew I should have taken a left turn at Lawson's, he didn't even make it to the venue. So I just one of the things too here is that, Goedo was 7-7 going into senshuraku, and just, everybody knew he was going to get his 8. And it's just kind of a rough thing to watch. But these Mongolians, they know better than to just, to just waylay the home team. It's you think about it like in baseball. If a team from Russia came and just joined the national the baseball, and just beat everybody constantly, it just would not resonate well for the sport. You know what I mean? Americans would start to say, look, and they wouldn't want to see anything fake happen. But by the same token, it would just the sort of legitimacy or the resonance of the sport would begin to just sort of dissolve. I mean, do you agree with that, Mike? Or
yeah, and Kane, to your point, as long as we're talking about sports, let's talk about American men's tennis, because myself growing up in the '80s and following tennis in the '90s when you had Agassi, Sampras, Courier. All of those guys, tennis was huge over here, but you just don't have any American tennis players anymore. And so that sport's completely fallen off the map. And you've got some great talent out there. You had Roger Federer and his run and Nadal, and, you've got some great players, but Americans aren't interested because there aren't any American men that are competitive. And if you go back to the last time when sumo was really having a tough time filling the seats. Now, granted, they did come off of a few scandals. They had the gambling scandal, then the Yaocho scandal. But if you remember what was happening, that was when Hakuho was making that run. And he went 4 tournaments, 15-0, and there was nobody that could even touch him, and it wasn't interesting. And, you'd get on the weekdays of the tournament, and they'd start off the broadcast, and you'd have 3 or 4 rows filled if you were lucky, and that was it. And so the Japanese people are not interested in watching their guys get their asses kicked. And so if they can score that upset towards the end of the tournament, leave everyone with a really good feeling at the end of the Basho, then the fans will keep coming back. And so the Mongolians realize where their bread is buttered. I mean, where would you rather live? Let's face it, in Tokyo, with all those beautiful women, the money, that lifestyle, or back, in Mongolia. They're not dumb. They know where their bread is buttered, and so they're going to play ball just to keep this lifestyle up and to be able to stay in sumo.
Yeah, at this point, I miss Kakizoe. I mean, at least he used to like pound the clay whenever he lost. He thought he should win every match. You don't see that attitude. And one of the reasons I think Yoshikazu is doing better. I mean, we call him Monster Drink because he's got this sort of frenetic style of every limb is moving in every direction kind of a style. But I think in some of the ways the rest of the field, other than the Sanyaku, I think is starting to like get a little weaker. I mean, you got Amudyu, and you have Gagomaru, who's like kind of fading a little bit, and I just felt like who is he coming up to the ranks? Now he beat some great guys, I'm saying, but my point is, I think that there's such a disparate there's such a difference between the guys that have NAD and the guys that don't. And I always feel sorry for Tochinoshin. I always felt that that guy physically, especially he's got these elephant legs. I mean, I think the guy now that he's got I think he's sort of found himself a little bit. He's not allowed to really erase too many Japanese rikishi. And I always wonder what goes on through these guys' heads as well. I mean, and it's sort of the question you were asking, Dan. It's like, why would you give it up on a regular basis like this? And I think there's got to be a little bit of a struggle because like what I was mentioning before, to become a great athlete, you have to have this sort of childlike passion. And you don't want to sort of sully that with any sort of behavior that's not 100% legit. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just based on economics, and he's right. Mongolia, I'd much rather be able to get some natto and some rice and maybe a little avocado with some soy sauce, while a girl is sitting on my head, that sort of a thing. So.
Yeah, you guys kind of touched, Mike, you brought up American tennis and stuff like that. One of the things I'm most interested in now is seeing this matchup that's going to happen on New Year's Eve in Japan. Baruto has decided that he's going to take an MMA fight. And
I saw that.
They have matched him up against Jerome Labanner. And I don't know if you guys know who this guy is or not, but he's a legend in the world of kickboxing, and he's a legit badass, and he's knocked out a lot of the top stars in kickboxing going back to the K1 days, and I think this is really, really bad news for Baruto.
I think Baruto knows how to take a punch, but if you've got an experienced guy like that who can kick and hit him in the head or hit him hard enough somewhere, if he takes him down, yeah, it'll be interesting. Yeah, but I did see the news where they were bringing him back for that New Year's Eve, that show.
Again, there's got to be a good check attached to it too. I mean, so much as this is based on economics. I mean, how much is it worth you to get your jaw cracked and suddenly you wake up in a hospital? You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Well, they do these kind of freak fights all the time in Japan where they'll match up two guys who are complete opposites. They put Fedor Emelianenko in there with Hongman Choi, and they do this kind of stuff all the time. And I think that they know that Baruto is going to be a huge draw, and I think it's a smart move on by the promoter because he's going to sell a ton of tickets with this fight. But just looking at it from Baruto's perspective, I think he is going to get murdered in this fight. And it's not going to be pretty. I mean, if he catches a left high kick from Labanner, he is going to be out cold.
Right.
I don't care how tough he is, and I don't think that many other guys in his position would fare any better. I don't see how sumo is going to help you in MMA. I don't see any way it can help you. There's no submissions in sumo. There's no kicking. There's no kneeing. Maybe you can grab him and run him across the cage into the fence and maybe get a takedown out of it. But I don't know that he has any grappling skills once he gets down there on the ground.
I know your first notion is that he should smother him, but if you have any knowledge of that stuff, that's never a pleasant ride. Especially if the guy you're trying to smother is the type of guy that you're describing. It's a very painful thing. You know what I mean? So he's going to have to do more than just rely on his massive size and everything. So yeah.
There was a couple of retirees this year, a couple of well-known retirees. Kyoku Tenho retired, and also Wakano Sato. What were your thoughts on those, Kane?
Well, Kyoku Tenho, I sort of I knew he was leaving. You could tell because he was on a downslide for a long time, and his he's always been kind of a favorite for a lot of people, and I was ambivalent about him because I think when the guys that I sort of entered sumo with were like Asa Shoju, Hako was there, Chio Taikai, guys like that showed some real was it Kaio, before he started to slow down. These are guys that were just sort of scary in terms of just how hard fighters they were. They'd come through. I really think that they had the right stuff, so to speak. So, there's been there's been a bunch of guys that have left over the years that sort of represented that sort of old guard of Japanese as well, where if they were there today, you would see a lot of different results. If they're in their prime, I'm not saying that they would dominate the Mongolians, but there'd be a lot more real fights going on that just sort of got you up off your seat. The guy that I missed the most is Wakana Sato, because I think he might have been the last vestige of that in many ways. Because I don't think I ever saw him henka. He was a straight charging guy. You could tell he loved the sport, and he loved the essence of the sport, and he loved the sport when it was real. So that was sort of an emotional thing for me, because Mike will tell you I always wrote about Wakana Sato. I called him the gangster because he just had this look about him that could have fit it could have been Al Capone or somebody like that. So, but I always that to me was a heartbreaker, because you have to sort of search through the Banzuke now to find somebody that has that same sort of honesty and truth in what he does. I don't, listen, I can't spot Yaocho, to the degree that some other people can. A lot of people don't know that Mike, as a kid used to be at these heias. He met some of these guys, some of these greats that we only read about, and saw them do keiko and practice and stuff like that. And he used to sneak down to the expensive seats and watch stuff all the time. I mean, just really sort of hardcore stuff. So he understands the sort of, dynamics that go on, and sort of the intricate nature of why somebody actually does oshidashi somebody, or somebody gets somebody down and throws them a certain way. And he can spot, for example, some of the sort of spectacular throws that Asa Shoju did. I think he did one on Baruto that was actually stunning, and stuff like that. So my point though is that somebody like Wakana Sato just for me was the real deal. Every time I saw him, I don't think I saw him throw a match in any way ever. So yeah, that was a heartbreak for me, more than Kyoku Tenho, who was great. I mean, he was a great guy to watch, a real sort of like a positive note during the Basho.
Yeah, I agree that those two guys, there's a bit of a contrast between them. You had Kyoku Tenho, who had the great sumo body, a lot of length, never quite lived up to his potential, but he didn't care. He seemed to be in it, just to stay into the Makuuchi division and pull that paycheck. He could come up with some okay counter wins at the edge, but he never had that fire. But then you contrast that with Wakano Sato, who, he was undersized. He had those crocodile arms, and and physically he didn't have the same body that a lot of the other guys did, but he was just so gritty, and he'd get to the inside, and once he got an inside grip on the belt, he could really do a lot of damage, especially against the great wrestlers like Kane was talking about back when Asashori was there, and Chiyo Taikai and Kaio, before he slowed down. And so the two wrestlers there was quite a contrast between them. They were both good. Kyokutenho, I think he was just in it for the longevity. He could hang around, but Wakano Sato, he was kind of that last bastion of Japanese, when the Japanese wrestlers were still good and they still had grit and they still knew how to fight at the belt. There's really not a lot of Japanese guys that can fight at the belt anymore.
Right.
Yeah, and there was a couple of deaths over the past year too. Some pretty notable guys. Takano Naomi and Kita Naomi both died. Now, Kita Naomi was 62, so he was getting up there. But what about Takano Naomi, because he was only 43? So that seems like it's definitely premature, right?
Yeah, it is, and it doesn't help sell the sport to the young crowd in Japan at all. And these guys, they do take a beating, just the nature of the sport and the health aspect of it, where they are athletes, they can move around well in the ring, but they eat a lot of calories, they gorge themselves, they take a nap. It's not a sport that's conducive to a healthy lifestyle, and it catches up to a lot of them. And Takano Naomi was, he's a good example. And these guys are drinking a lot of alcohol, and it's taking a toll on their liver, and over time, you do lose guys in their 40s, not as much, but a lot of these guys will pass away and they can't even make it to retirement, like Kitano.
Yeah, Mike, one of the things you mentioned is that the lifestyle, after each match, like when they go out and they're drinking and partying and stuff. A lot of these guys, they, even though they're sort of presented as kind of Pollyanna is just people that are just completely devoted to the sport, which the sport kind of demands because the way it's set up. But a lot of them don't live that sort of clean, perfect kind of existence. You were telling me that before.
Right. There's a lot of kind of partying going on, and they're up late. It's probably a lot like guys in the music business. You lose artists early because of the lifestyle. They're up late. They're out partying. They don't get enough sleep. And, in the case of sumo wrestlers, they've got to get up early that next day for practice. And I'm sure they're hungover a lot. And I think it all catches up to them. The hard lifestyle catches up to them in the end.
Yeah, it's a very sort of rich lifestyle. And, we talk about chanko nabe and just the amount of food that they're eating. And it's all about just this sense of overindulgence. And the symbol actually in Japan of these giant guys is power, the overindulgence, the fat, the being really big that way, represents a lot of very masculine, a lot of power. You know what I mean? It's not like in America, obese people are they're not thought about as being
right.
weak, whereas the contrast is in Japan is kind of the opposite.
Yeah, it's interesting that Kita Naomi was the head of the Japan Sumo Association. I recognized him, I guess, as most of being one of the judges. And, whenever there's a mono-e or something, right. Seeing him up there and making the call and stuff like this. But it'll be interesting. Mike, what do you think's going to happen now that the head of the Sumo Association has died? Do you think it's just going to be business as usual and that they're going to keep going with what they've been doing? Or do you think this is going to be a time for, it looks like Hoku Tomi, I don't really know who that is. He was before my time, but another Yokozuna is taking over. Do you think that he's going to shake things up a little bit, or it'll be more business as usual?
I think it's going to be business as usual because what they're doing right now is working. And Kitano Umi, it seems like what they're doing is they're electing the commissioner based on, they're electing Yokozuna, former Yokozuna. So there's Kitano Umi, and then Hokuto Umi is actually from the same stable as Chiyono Fuji, and he was a little bit older, and so it's probably Hokuto Umi's turn, and when he retires or when he dies, they're probably going to give it to Chiyono Fuji. So it's kind of an old guard system. It was probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago when Sumo was going through the scandals. You had a couple of stables and even an Ichimon, and they were trying to kind of break away from tradition and get Takanohane in there as the new commissioner, but they just didn't quite have the votes to pull it off. And so what you're seeing is just these guys are kind of all in line based on their age and when they retired, these former Yokozuna. So it was Kitano Umi, now it's going to go to Hokuto Umi, and then it'll go to Chiyono Fuji, I presume. Then once you're done with Chiyono Fuji, there is Isegahama Oyakata, who is Asahi Fuji. He's the current stable master of Haruma Fuji and Teruno Fuji right now. It may go to him. We'll just have to see. But I don't expect really anything to change with Hokuto Umi in there, because things are working in sumo right now. The sumo's not great in my opinion, but they've got a lot of popularity and they're selling those places out. So I don't think they're going to change anything. I certainly don't get the sense that Hokuto Umi is some kind of rebel that's going to come in and change anything. So I think it's status quo from here on out.
And that's one of the difficulties too, because, after a basho like the last one, and, don't get me wrong, there's one of the reasons I watch is you can pull down so much joy and entertainment. You'll see some really good matches in the course of every evening. But, you just don't want to think that every basho is going to feel like that. So you say to yourself, okay, so am I the anomaly? In other words, is there any nod to people of my mindset? Not just because I'm gaijin and I'm not in Japan. I'm just saying, is that sort of a viable kind of demographic in Japan, like that feel the way I do? To be honest with you, my first notion is, well, I think not. You know what I mean? So it's almost like my opinion doesn't matter that much, but I would hope that, some shoe drops somewhere across, over the next few years where, and if that has to be a hyper talented Japanese rikishi, which I don't see anything on the horizon. I know Mike looks a little deeper into, what could be known as the future of Japanese, sumo, but I just don't see that, coming down the road. But they're going to have to dump some of these guys very soon. Kisena Sato and Koto Shogiku. I mean, you just can't keep propping these guys up. So
yeah, they're broken physically. Yeah,
they're completely broken physically, and So I mean, I just hope that. I hope that, for some reason, just in terms of the sort of warp and woof of some of these, bashos coming up, that we get some great nights that just seem to happen. I mean, I it's really easy to feel kind of negative about it. And I'm certainly not going against what Mike says. He's not doing things out of negativity. It's just like an analysis of what's happening. And by the way, it's still engaging. It's still quite a sort of a mindfuck to look at everything and try to figure out exactly what's going on and why it's happening and why somebody won and why that didn't look 100%. But my hope is that we get some really like a string of like a number of great nights over the next basho, which can still happen. So I think the only thing that's offensive is that when you see Endo go up there and you see some of that stuff for Goedo, you just got to kind of blank some of those matches out, but yeah, and you said it's a lot like rock and roll. The whole lifestyle of the Yokozuna or the Ozekis or any rikishi. It's just not the elite. That is very true. A lot of these guys, they don't think straight. I mean, you think of it this way. I was lucky enough because I did a lot of writing. So, and that's the real estate of the music industry. But a lot of these guys that were in these massive bands, like bands that were just, you were thinking this is the biggest band ever. Well, those bands are gone now, and they didn't do any writing. So the money is completely gone. The residuals from the recordings are completely gone. The only real estate that you really have is if you write these songs, and through the sales of the songs and people re-recording them and using them in films and stuff, you can still generate checks every month. So I think, I'm not saying that that's why people die young, but you really do have to sort of keep your wits about you and not be just hitting, drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, and just sort of partying, because the lifestyle really sort of like suggests that you do. You get back from a show and there's like 20 girls like in the lobby. You know what I mean? And granted, they all look, like Burl Ives. No, I'm kidding. No, but you just got to sort of, put a cap on it and try to know, where your future is and stuff like that. So you got to be a little bit careful, but it's very difficult. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in.
And would it be fair to say that Endo is sort of like the Kip Winger of sumo?
Yes, he is. He's very much, and the problem is that if Beavis and Butthead do a thing about him that's insulting, he'll get very upset and his career will slow down a little bit, which is kind of what. But no, Endo is just Endo can just host a game show. He can do his career. His life is set now, unless he does, unless he gets hurt or whatever. But I'm almost like wondering. I'm sure I get the feeling, because he knows exactly where it is, just like he's probably trying to time this thing so he can phase into something, more, even more lucrative, past this, because, one of the points you guys are making is it's not easy to practice for this stuff and go through this stuff. So, and to stay that heavy and everything. I mean, I'm sure that he's if he has some sort of an agent or manager, they're trying to time this thing so that he can phase into the next part of his career and not be an athlete and get into acting or, some sort of bowling for dollars show on TV or something. So,
yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point though, because like the way that sumo is set up, it's like if you get injured or if you get hurt, seriously, where you're gonna have to take, half a year off or a year off or something like that. If you blow your knee out, you're out for like 9 months, at least, if you really want to, recover 100%, in which case you basically have to start from scratch. So what are you guys' opinions on that? Do you think that that's a fair thing to do? Do you think sumo should be updated, or that's just something that we should have to live with? And what's your take on that? Because it was like, some of these guys, they basically grow up in a heya, from the time they're almost in diapers still, and then they move into the, adult diapers, let's say, of sumo. But then they're like bred for this sport. They train, they work their asses off to get to a high ranking, sort of like Osuna Arashi just had, surgery, and then your whole career could go right down the toilet and you have to start your whole life over again doing something else. So do you think it's fair that, if a guy gets injured and he has to sit out a few tournaments, that he should have to start over again, in Jonokuchi division or something?
Well, you have a good example recently with Totsino Shin. He suffered a knee injury, and I think probably for about 18 months he slid down the ranks, and he was down in the Makushita division. And I guess the positive thing is, if you've still got game and you've got a good sumo body that's worthy of that top division, you can and will work your way back up. Sumo used to have a system in there, they'd call it the Kojo system, I believe it was, where if you were injured in an actual home basho bout, that they would give you the next tournament off free, and you wouldn't fall through the ranks, and they'd let you recover from your injuries. But the problem there is too many guys were taking advantage of it, and so they'd get injured in a home basho bout, but then they would take too much time coming back. They kind of milked the system and wouldn't come back as fast, and so they actually changed that system, and they ended up adding a couple more ranks, both in the Makuuchi division and the Juryo division, to kind of compensate that. So it's really a tough topic there, because you want those top guys around, but that they're just an injury away, falling down and falling off the face of the earth for a year or more. Right now, though, with the Japanese guys, I don't really see anyone that's, number one, fighting hard enough and generating enough hype that where it would really matter right now in the current landscape of sumo. So I don't think you could lose any one Japanese guy. There's no guy out there that you'd lose and you'd be like, oh no, what are we going to do now? And so right now, and I think the guys are fighting a little bit lighter. I don't see a lot of hard fought matches. So maybe not as many guys are going to be injured. I don't know. It's a tough place because, it's a tough sport. You could go down at any time, but the banzuke never lies, as I like to say. And if you're injured and you can't put people in the seats and sell tickets, you've got to go down, and they've got to try and bring someone else up, at least temporarily.
I just wanted to bring up a couple of names from the lower divisions. There's one guy who's generating a lot of attention. I believe he's in Makushita now. His name is Ura. You just spell it Ura. And he was undefeated at the Kyushu Basho, and he has a very peculiar style where he just doesn't like rush at you at the tachi. He kind of like sits back and then tries to really lean in really far with his head and his shoulders, almost putting his head down like below his waist, like at times, in order to secure a grip. And he goes after the legs and things like this. Have you been keeping an eye on this guy, Mike?
Well, yeah, they're not talking about him a lot right now during the Makuuchi broadcast, but every morning I get up, I scan the sumo wires, and that guy probably gets 25% of the headlines right now. And yeah, his name is Ura. He's a small guy. He reminds me of Mai no Umi. So you're right, Don, and that tachi where he kind of sits back, ducks his head, kind of unorthodox, and he's famous for the ippon zeoi throw. It's kind of a move that you see in judo a lot. Not that I know anything about judo, but the reason I know about it is because the media is always talking about it. And so he's a really unorthodox guy who's able to get in and pull off these strange moves in the ring, and you never see him in the higher ranks. And he's a guy that might be able to do it. And I'm glad you brought him up because he could be not the future of sumo, but a legitimate guy that they could market for the next foreseeable future. I don't think he's got the body to really make a huge impact in the division, but he's got enough gimmicks to his sumo, just like Mai no Umi did. He's got enough gimmicks there, and he can win, with some of those judo moves that aren't even seen anymore. And it's those little gimmicks that Japan loves. For some reason, you find just this little gimmick thing, and they glom onto it, and it sells tickets. And so, yeah, Ura's definitely a guy to watch, not necessarily because of his straightforward chest-to-chest sumo, but he's another exciting guy like Mai no Umi was.
Did you see any similarities between him and Satoyama?
Oh, you know what? That's a good point that you bring that up, because Satoyama's got that same kind of tachi where he kind of flinches. Now, I've seen two of Ura's bouts, where he's pulled off that ippon zeoi move. Yeah. So I haven't seen him enough day in and day out to where I can really comment on his sumo. But, like Don pointed out, he was going undefeated in all these tournaments. I think he's lost once in his entire professional career. And, these guys just don't know how to handle him yet. And the Makusta division it's not a slouch division. There's a lot of talent there. It's a really cutthroat division. So for him to be able to do what he's doing in that division, I think he's going to become a sekitori, and he should eventually make Makuuchi, and we'll see. Endo's got no game at this point, and they've somehow managed to keep him on the banzuke in that highest division. So I'm sure they'll be able to do the same with Ura. And if he can get in there and pull off a couple of these dynamic moves, that's exactly what sumo needs right now to maintain this popularity.
And what's your opinion on this Canadian guy, Homura Nishiki? He was 6-1 from a Jonidan 8 position, so he could be moving up to a Sandame division after this, and he seems to be quite promising. He's still struggling to find his footing a little bit at times, it seems like, but as he matures and gets older, could be doing quite well, I think.
Yeah, this guy Homura Nishiki, I've seen him fight once or twice. He's got a great sumo body, but if you contrast him to Ura, who's a lot smaller wrestler, Ura's just flying up the charts, and Homura Nishiki's not going up quite as fast. He should be fighting in Sandame in January. He's got that body, but I don't know how athletic he is yet at this point. So I think he'll eventually make it to Sekitori status just because there's not a lot of competition in there right now. The young people in Japan are interested in a lot more than sumo, and I don't think it's as cutthroat to rise up as high. So we should see him up there, but I don't think he's going to come in and make a huge impact. I don't think he'll make the impact that, say, an Osuna Arashi has done.
Yeah, it seems like he's just like he's nervous or something, or he hasn't like broken out of his shell yet or something like that. And I don't blame him. He's the only blonde-haired dude, in the sport. So
yeah, curly blonde hair. He looks like an amateur. He still fights like an amateur. And that's no disrespect, but the tachi isn't sharp and the movement isn't there yet. So he's got the body. So if he can just, look at like Amuru, it took him, no, wait a minute. Who is that guy from the Czech Republic that recently retired? He was from the same stable as Kiseno Sato, kind of like an Amuru type, and it took him like 12 years to get to the division, and he had okay success, when he was up there. So he's got the body to do it. I think he can make it, but yeah, he looks lost right now. He still fights like an amateur.
I'm still looking for Rojo's comeback. That guy was my favorite. No, I'm kidding. No. I remember I saw him in L.A. They did one of those exhibition matches in L.A. It was and Asa showed you one. I got to see Hako. It's an exhibition, so whatever. But the funny thing was, I think he scored some weed when he was here, and then Rojo, and then they caught him, and it was the end of his career. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so looking ahead to 2016, what do you guys see on the horizon? What kind of a year do you think we can expect? Is it going to be another year of Mongolians just stomping a mud hole in everybody's ass? Or do you think there's any kind of a hope for a Japanese Yusho or any other predictions or assumptions for the coming year?
Well, I think it's going to be kind of it's going to be what we've seen. I think one of the most interesting things to watch though is Hako, because he does run the show. He's sort of the nexus of everything that takes place.
He's the godfather.
So whether or not he does any sort of vocal commands on what's going to take place, you can tell that he's sort of he's surveying the landscape constantly, and he can I am one of the people who does believe he can win and lose pretty much whenever he wants, and he's still in that mode up against the best that the Mongolians even have to offer. I don't see one Japanese rikishi that could accidentally beat him. I just don't really see it. I see Terunofuji. I think it's possible for him to at the very least approach Yokozuna status. I to me, one of the odd dynamics up there is Kakuryu. I'm not sure what his placement is, and like when I try to explain why he's there, it's almost like he's one of the sort of the oars on the boat in terms of like how to keep people excited about the Japanese Ozeki or whoever else that goes up against him from Japan. So I'm not sure about that. I think if Terunofuji like enters that rank, something has to shake loose. I'm not sure about having 4 Mongolian Yokozuna is ever going to play properly. So we just gotta watch that. But I think, to me, one of the most fascinating things, and this is a lot of stuff that I've gleaned from Sumo Talk and just watching now, and as I gradually grow to understand more of the dynamics of sumo, Hako's is an extremely fascinating character because the backdrop of it is his stunning ability, his physical gifts. You mentioned tennis before. People ask how these guys. Number 182 on the tennis tour is an amazing player. I mean, if you go up against the guy and you've been playing and you're doing well or whatever, and you run into this guy, these guys are incredible. So then you say, like, who's number 10? And then you mentioned Sampras. Well, these guys are just made. They're born to do this particular sport. The way, the speed that they see the balls, that their joints, their height, everything is just perfect for how they perceive the sport. And I think Hako has all of those plates spinning more than anybody up there. Teruno Fuji, seems to be in that realm. He's at least, orbiting that realm a certain amount. But I've never seen that sort of, elegance and intelligence and pure raw power that, I've ever seen, in almost any sport as this guy, Hako. So I'll be curious to see how he navigates, in my mind, the ins and outs and sort of the future of sumo, through 2016. That's, I don't know what Mike feels about that, but that's sort of my notion of it.
Yeah, I agree with Kane. I don't think there's going to be a lot of surprises in 2016. Hakuho still, he rules the roost, and he can choose and decide whatever he wants. Teruno Fuji is going to be really interesting because he's obviously, when you compare him to Kakuryu and Haruma Fuji, he's a yokozuna. He's not there officially yet, but he will get there someday. But it'll be interesting. I don't think the association would like to see him rise to yokozuna so fast, and because it makes it. You see a guy like Teruno Fuji just come out of nowhere, and in a year's time, pick up his first Yusho, make it to the Ozeki rank, and then if he makes it to yokozuna, it will be like, well, why can't any of the Japanese guys do that?
What does that say about Senesato? Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so they may hold back on Teruno Fuji a little bit. The problem is, though, I see going into 2016, and I've been talking about this in my reports probably the last half of 2015, and that's, you've got these 4 guys who are all yokozuna for all intents and purposes. Even if 2 of them go out, you've still got the other 2, and you don't have anybody else that can even remotely compete with them. So like in September, when Teruno Fuji, he was cruising to the Yusho, and then he went down and got hurt and ended up, with the losing streak and didn't take the cup in the end. But Kakuryu was right there, backed right into the Yusho, and that's because there was no competition from anyone else. So I think the biggest story of 2016 is, how do we handle having 4 of these guys now every tournament? Because if they fight all out, they're going to suck up so many wins, and you just can't afford to have those guys winning 12 apiece or 13 apiece, because then you're getting up to 48 wins, and that means less wins for everybody else. So I don't see a lot of change from where we've been. I do not see anybody else coming up through the ranks. I'd be shocked if there was a Japanese guy down there. I know there's not. Ura's probably the next guy that will bring some kind of excitement. It doesn't mean we won't see a Japanese Yusho. It's possible, anything's possible. And certainly the Mongolians have shown that they're willing to play ball. They're not just going to give it away, but they're willing to give away those key bouts. So it wouldn't surprise me to see a Japanese guy take the Yusho. He certainly wouldn't do it legitimately, and call me crazy, but until they, eradicate all foreigners from sumo wrestling, I don't think you'll see a legitimate Japanese Yusho ever. And so we'll see what happens, 10 years from now. But 2016, it's going to be more of the same, a little bit of frustration. There's the necessity is still there to have the Mongolians get, suffer upsets to the Japanese guys. And we'll see what kind of excitement they can create. They've got a storyline now with Hokuto Umi going in there as the new commissioner. Maybe they can get a little bit of hype off of that and what direction we're going in. But I don't think there's a lot of excitement in store for 2016, and I'm probably a glass half empty guy on this right now, just because I don't see the quality sumo in the ring. So, nothing surprises me at this point. I think it's just more of the same of what we've seen in 2015.
Yeah, and it could get worse before it gets better, because I think there's like 3 Mongolians at the top of that are going to be moving into Makuuchi this Basho. I don't know if all of them are or not, but at least 2 of them are. So it's going to be even more flooded with Mongolians in January.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's all we need, more strong foreigners.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about on a personal note, Kane? You got any musical projects coming up, or any acting gigs or anything like that?
Well, yeah, I have a song that I just finished, and the thing is, I think the process is so different now, especially in the music industry. The way I did it back in the '80s could not happen today. Kids today that strap on a guitar and they play, and then they figure, I'll move to Hollywood or something like that. Somebody discover me and I'll have a record deal and all this stuff. It doesn't happen anymore. So, it at least not in that way. So in terms of me, but what I am excited about in the industry is the whole internet thing, and just sort of this sort of network that you can enter and get your music spread out, across the Great Divide, and you can have people that would never normally hear your music. You can expose them to it. So I think along with that, technology comes in and it sort of like cuts the legs out from so many industries. It's done, all the way down the line. You can just see how certain things have come and gone. And one of the things that I think that also indicates is you have to change your methods in terms of the creative process as well. So what I did was I wrote a bunch of songs with some people, and then I got two or three different producers who come from entirely different, fields of music. Total like, bass drop tech, rave and stuff, or one of my friends who works at Hans Zimmer, and he scored Madagascar and The Ring and stuff like that. I had them completely devolve my recordings. I gave them the raw tracks and just sort of rebuild the song in their vision. And then I take pieces from what they did and I sort of rebuild the song again, as the final version. So I've just finished one of those, and then I'm going to shoot a video, and the video is going to be, I'll be able to access a lot of my friends who some of the film work that I've done, with my company, we did, one of the guys that did VTR for all the Matrix films and Aliens, he's going to work on it. I got a special effects guy that did, Bourne, Legacy and the latest Batman and Mission Impossible. He's doing some special effects and advising me, and he's sending me these rigs, these things that explode with blood and all that stuff. So I'm sort of going to create a little bit of a cinematic joint that goes along with the music. My intent is not necessarily to get out there and be in the top 10 or compete on that level. I just want to keep the creative stuff going. I'm also doing a thing called Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. And, if you think about, a long time ago, you heard about the baseball fantasy camp where you could go, these people would pay a lot of money and they'd be able to, play for a few days with Reggie Jackson or whoever. Well, this guy, called me in to do that. And I thought it was going to be kind of lame. But what you have is mostly these wealthy guys that, they grew up listening to me and then, other people like that. So there's a sort of certain level of rock star that's the camp counselor, guys that I've known for years. And then sort of the benchmark, like the bigger celebrity does a walkthrough during the weekend. Like Gene Simmons, he was there and it was good to see him again. But, these guys that pay, $5 to $10 grand for 3 or 4 days, they get to actually play a song with Gene Simmons and hang out with him. So it's a big deal for everybody. So I've been doing that a little bit. The next one we're doing is in February with Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath and Steve Vai, Zakk Wylde, and this guy Warren Haynes. He's a great slide guitar player. So it's going to be like a guitar festival. And then we're all going to play, at the Lucky Strike in Hollywood, and then at the Whiskey. So, it's been, those are the type of things I'm just doing to keep active. And then I also like to spend a good portion of the day staring at a wall and drooling because, no, I'm kidding. No, but yeah, but that's basically what I get doing in terms of the music. And then, I got the other stuff that I actually like sort of make money with. So, but yeah.
Cool.
That's it for me. Yeah.
What about you, Mike? What's going to be going on with Sumo Talk in 2016?
Boy, I don't know. We'll see if we can get, right now it's just been Harvey and myself, going every other day. I'll probably put a post out to see if there's anyone else interested in contributing. We'll see. I like to write. It's in my blood. I wish I could do sumo talk for a living. Because I'd love to write, and probably the reason I'm doing it, I still do it, is just because I enjoy the writing aspect. I like to rile people up. I like the fact that, there's, maybe half of the people out there don't agree with my takes, but they still come back and read. And so, it's fun. I've been really, practicing my dancing. So if Kane ever gets back into music, I'm trying to talk him into letting me be his backup dancer. So,
Yes, I really need backup male backup dancers for my show.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be business as usual with sumo talk. Hopefully, there's enough storylines to keep everything interesting and keep me writing about it.
Yeah, sumo talk is just, it is the number one place to go. I think there's a couple of other sites and some forums that I think are just they kind of accept everything that they're seeing as being legit, which is fine. I'm never judgmental of it, but I think sumo talk, forces you to kind of engage the brain a little deeper and not just take things on face value, which is never a bad process. It pisses some people off. I mean, it might get some guys that just come at him like really hard. And from talking to Mike in the emails, he's kind of yucking it up, and he'll throw a bomb in there to get things even more riled up and everything. Right. But the core of it is, though, it's there's a serious side to it as well. So the whole sumo talk thing, and the writers do contribute a lot. I would keep writing, but I got so many complaints because I would have a girl in the bikini at the end of all of my reviews and everything. And, Mike's finally said, look, you can't have women showing any skin, dude. And I said, this is really, it's my principles. It's my artistic sort of integrity in question here. So he fired me. So it was awful.
Yeah, and it's not just like that with sumo. It's pretty much everything, right? Because any idiot can take a look at the facts of what happened in 9/11 and see that everything that was in the 9/11 Commission report is not exactly adherent to reality. But if you question it, you're labeled a conspiracy theorist by a lot of people, and you'll be blackballed from whatever organization. So I think it kind of goes the same way with sumo too. A lot of people are interested in the conspiracy theory talk. Some people get pissed off if you even mention it, and others just revel in it. So
yeah, and it's a good process, even with the people that are getting upset. I mean, they're getting a lot out of it, and I think they like engaging on whatever level. So, as far as the 9/11 Commission, anything that comes out of the government, you got to just kind of chuckle about a little bit because we're not getting a story there. Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as from my perspective, January 6th will be the 1-year anniversary of the FightBox podcast. And just wanted to say that the episodes about sumo have been some of the most popular and requested podcasts of the entire year.
Yeah, so everybody loves naked dudes. That's what it is.
Right. Yeah, and I was telling Kane, hey, there's too much female skin. Let's go back to the male skin. Come on.
I know, like the Mawashi is the first G string. As you can see, it's pretty. It's kind of primitive,
That's right.
All right, so I'd love to have you guys back on again sometime in 2016. And anything else you guys want to get in or plug before we get out of here?
No, that's pretty much it. I'm just going to go lie down and cry somewhere. So that's about it for me tonight.
Nope,
right,
nothing else to plug. I appreciate everyone that keeps reading Sumo Talk. I appreciate Kane, even though he's not contributing. He is contributing, a little bit on the back end. And, we come up with these pictures and things, like the Three Amigos was one of the most recent ones. And, you got to do stuff like that, in my opinion, to keep your sanity when you're, you expect sumo to be, I want it to be straight up. I wish it was, but it's not all the time. And so it's good to have, these outlets where you can have a little bit of fun. It definitely keeps you sane when you've got to write about something that can get so frustrating. So nothing really to plug, but hey, yeah, I love talking sumo, and yeah, I'm up for a podcast anytime you want us. So yeah, give us a call back, Don.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it's on a serious note. I feel it's an honor to be able to talk about this stuff because, truly I'm a neophyte. So I'm learning as we go along and everything. So I was always kind of, honored that I was able to write for Sumo Talk and for, the guys there, the people to read it and for Mike to, put up with everything, my learning process and everything. So, and, I'm also totally jazzed to be on your show there, Dan. So, thanks so much for the opportunity to, touch base with your fans and stuff.
Yeah, my pleasure. I never thought that I would have a rock star on the FightBox podcast, but anything's possible, I guess. And big fan of your work as well. And want to thank both you guys for coming on. Wish you guys a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll talk again in 2016.
Rock on.
All right, sounds good.
All right, take care.
All right, rock on, guys.
Does anybody really fall in love anymore? Does anybody really give their heart to somebody? Does anybody really ever open that door? I know, you've got to love somebody. I know, I've got to find somebody to love, baby.
All right, guys, so there you have it. Kane Roberts and Mike Wesemann right here on the FightBox podcast. And certainly want to thank those guys once again, especially Mike Wesemann for the third time for joining us here to talk about sumo. This is great. I don't have anybody to talk with sumo about in Rzeszów, Poland. So Rzeszów can be a very lonely place sometimes if you're a sumo fan. It's just it's always good to talk to Mike, and was really cool to have Kane on the show as well. As you guys heard, man, he's not just a guitar player. I mean, he knows his stuff about sumo, and obviously both these guys have very strong opinions about sumo as far as the match fixing and the yaocho and the letting up in the ring and all of that is concerned. And, they aren't afraid to let people know how they feel either. I do feel obligated to say that I do not always agree with what they have to say, but here's what I do. You know what I mean? I always read Mike's reports when he writes them on sumotalk.com, and very often he points out things in very extreme detail about what's going on here. Like, he put his left hand here, but then it slid out because this guy moved his hip back, and then he reached for the other one, and he started charging forward, and he lowered his hips a little bit too much. And see, he really knows the ins and outs of sumo and all the technical moves and things that they make. And he very often points it out exactly where it happened and why perhaps it happened. And so if I'm not sure about something, maybe what I do is I read Mike's report and then I look the bout up on YouTube, and then try to watch it back and read Mike's comments and see if it makes sense. And 9 times out of 10, it usually does. So he really knows his stuff, and sometimes I think that maybe people get irritated by it because he's right, and other times he's not, and other times he just has he's speculating, or he's but you got to commend him for he's sticking to his guns, he's got his opinion, and he's sticking to it, and he doesn't take any gruff from anybody, and it's very rare, like I said, that I have any chance to talk to anybody about sumo. So it's always a pleasure. So I suggest that if you are a sumo fan, go to sumotalk.com, check out their day-by-day reports as the Basho is happening. We've got the next Basho coming up, the next tournament coming up in January. The Haru Basho, which starts on January 10th and runs through the 24th. So we've got that to look forward to. They've got the new Banzuke out already. What I do is I usually go to the Sumo database to get all the information, because they've just got loads of information on there. One of the best Sumo websites as far as information and facts is concerned. SumoDB.com. sumogames.de, or maybe you can just search Sumo database and you can find it that way. And if you can't watch the tournament on TV, if you don't have it on TV, the best way to watch it is there's a guy on YouTube who does an excellent job of uploading all the videos in an extremely fast and manner. His name is Kintamayama, and that's how I watch it. So want to hats off to Kintamayama. Thank you very much, sir, for uploading those bouts onto YouTube. And should be a good Basho. Mike Wesemann is a little bit pessimistic as to how things are going to be in 2016, as you heard. But I'm looking forward to it. I always enjoy the sumo bouts. As I'm watching the bouts, there's not very often that I think that could be Yauch or that this guy could be letting up. Every once in a while, I get that feeling, but more often than not, I just sit back and watch the bouts as they happen and have a good time watching the sumo tournaments. Now, as I said at the top of the podcast, I do want to get my fight of the year out of the way here, and it's a good one. It's a kickboxing match. As a lot of the live events and a lot of the programs we show on FightBox is kickboxing. I think it's one of the most exciting fighting sports out there. If you're not a kickboxing fan, if you're just a sumo fan and you've just been listening to this podcast because you like sumo, I don't care what fighting sport is your favorite. You are going to love this fight because it looks like a fight scene out of Rocky 1 or something like this. It's just incredible, and it'll absolutely make you want to just soil your trousers right on the spot because it's an incredible, hard-hitting fight. It's like a brawl at times. The action gets out of control, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's a thrilling fight from start to finish, and like I said, it's just like a fight scene out of Rocky for the entire 4 rounds that it goes. You can check it out on the FightBox YouTube channel for free. If you go to YouTube and search for the name of our channel, FightBox HD, all one word. The fight is from Super Combat from November 7th of this year. I had the pleasure of being there live. Maybe that's why I'm a little bit partial to it. But I was there doing commentary at ringside, and just what a show this one was. Marios Blanas versus Bogdan Nastase from Super Combat, November 7th, 2015 from Bucharest, Romania, is one of the best and most exciting fights of the year, in my opinion. So that's it. That wraps it up. This is the final episode of 2015. The very first year of the FightBox podcast is in the books. I want to thank everybody that came along for the ride, whether this is the first time you've ever tuned in, or whether you've joined us sporadically as the episodes entice you to, or whether you're one of the hardcore listeners who's here each and every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for supporting this podcast, no matter how you supported it. If you've only listened to one episode, or if you've told your friends about it, if you shared the links online, if you've let other people know about it on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, wherever you like to do it, thank you very much. The next episode will be in the first week of January. It should be January 6th will be the very first episode. It will be every podcast drops on a Wednesday. So January 6th will be the next episode. It will be our 1 year anniversary. And that is all thanks to you guys. So thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure you download next week's episode. It'll be the 1 year anniversary show. And I could have a few surprises up my sleeve. So until then, this is Don Roid. We'll see you right back here next week. Until then, so long, everybody.